Welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad to have you back for our fourth session. I'm Melanie Perry. I am the co-host of the First Case podcast and also the perioperative clinical manager for Beyond Clean. And I personally have had a fantastic day. I have learned so many things in all of our sessions so far. Remember, there's a downloadable resource window on your screen. You can get sponsor brochures from Proper and also some bonus CE content that you can access there. So please make sure you check it out. Now, our next speaker is my coworker and dear friend, Lindsay Brown. Lindsay, so glad to have you here.
Hey, Melanie, I am so excited to be spending my Friday in this way. What a cool way to spend the day. I'm honored.
Yes, it has been a wonderful day. I learned something from every single session, and really, Jamie really made me think in the first session with like writing down actual positive things or strengths that I'm good at. And I'm like, yeah, I don't do that. And it's something good to really think about, to think about what it is that we're good at and to actually be able to say it. I enjoyed it for sure.
What's so interesting to me is she made such a cool point this morning when she was like, when you're around kids, you give them praise, you say you're proud of them, and you give them positive feedback. But all of a sudden, when you cross into this magical adult land, and all of that positive affirmation that you get externally all of a sudden fades for whatever reason. And right. So the onus is more on ourselves to be that cheerleader and to be that motivator. And that's really hard to do unless you're intentional about it. And you think to yourself, wow, I haven't been intentional about telling myself what I'm proud of lately. So I thought she made some really, really great points on that. And another thing that I was thinking about was the fact that with a majority of sterile processing conferences, the content that's provided, the education that's provided is more focused on what we do rather than who we are.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved that Proper and Jamie specifically were like, professional development conference, yes, we're in, because it's so rare that in the sterile processing industry that there's an entire conference focused on being a better you and being a better me. And I think that that's just so valuable.
No, you bring up such a good point, because we focus on who we are defined by our career and not who we are personally sometimes. And so personal development and professional development, I mean, it's been a win. I've enjoyed it today for sure, but I'm looking forward to your presentation as well. I mean, it just keeps going. I'm just like, yes, let's get on with it. This is good.
Absolutely. Well, I'm super excited to get into this presentation. Today, my presentation is called Check Your Professional Blind Spot, Limiting Mindsets and the Other Stuff Holding You Back. And I think the title is apt for a number of reasons for me personally, but not the least of which is that my professional blind spots have gotten in my way in the past. And so what I'm excited to do is I'm excited to challenge everyone and encourage everyone who's tuned into this session to be mindful about what your blind spots are. And hopefully, I mean, best case scenario, you're like, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what a limiting mindset is. And so foundationally speaking, hopefully this presentation will be a way to level set and to add language to maybe certain feelings that you've felt, but just haven't been able to have the words or the vocabulary to describe them. So this presentation is near and dear to my heart. It's based off of a lot of the information that I've learned through my professional training that I've done. Or that I've gone through as a student. And so a lot of the concepts are wrapped into this presentation. Let's get right into it. Something that I want to encourage you to do is to understand the idea of being self-aware. Understand the idea that you have limitations emotionally, mentally, physically, and that you are ultimately in control of the way you approach a situation, the way you react, and maybe not the way you react, but the way you respond to a situation. And so I want you to keep those things in mind. I know I mentioned this when Melanie and I were talking, but this whole conference is an opportunity to focus on you. And I think that that is so special. A lot of the times we focus on the things that you do, the relationships that you build, but not very often do we have an opportunity to spend a whole conference making you a better professional, encouraging you to be a better individual for yourself and for the people around you that mean the most to you. So I'm excited to get into this. a little bit about me. I work for a company called Beyond Clean. You may have heard of it. If you haven't, awesome, welcome. We're here to be the voice of sterile processing. We shine a spotlight on the people, processes, and products that are pushing the industry forward. So if you're new to finding out who Beyond Clean is and what we're about, oh gosh, welcome. I'm super excited for you. Personally, I am a doer. I'm a multitasker. I'm a fairly busy person. I thrive under busy circumstances. If you saw the amount of tabs that I have open on my computer at all times, you would probably have the same reaction as my husband. Like, how do you function like this? But I do my best when I have multiple irons in the fire, and I know that about me. I'm also a certified birth doula. So twice a month, I provide emotional and physical support to individuals and families welcoming or bidding farewell to a new baby. I'm married to the best human I know. He's the best human on this planet, and we have 3 wild, spunky, exhausting, and lovely kids. They're on the screen right here: Vivian, Lucy, and Lewis. Oh my gosh, they keep us on our toes, that's for sure. This presentation about limiting mindsets, and I'll get into the nitty-gritty about what limiting mindsets are, but I want to give you an example right from the beginning here that has to do with this earnest and sincere question that my daughter asked me. It was sometime last year. I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but I know it was a Saturday. It was a weekend. I can put myself in this moment where she came up to me and she said, "Mama, can you play with me, or do you have another phone call?" And in that moment, and at the time she was 3, and in that moment, it was kind of like, you know, those slow motion, like your entire past comes rushing back into your mind or flashes before your eyes. It was a moment of perspective. It was a moment that told me the perspective that my daughter had of me and my time, of me and my priorities, and a moment of perspective for me to take a step back and say, okay, there's an opportunity for balance. Obviously, I was overwhelmed with guilt. Like, mom guilt is no joke, but I saw it as an opportunity to create balance. And so a lot of this presentation is fueled by and inspired by that really, really terrible mom moment that I experienced that one Saturday last year. Let's talk about what limiting mindsets are. I don't know how many of you have ever heard this term before. If you haven't, that's okay. It's not a term that gets used very often. You can envision a limiting mindset as a mental ceiling, or something that keeps you from advancing to the next level or improving your position in life, whether that's personally or professionally. You can only go so far in life until you hit some type of ceiling. And when it's obviously physical ceilings, we can grasp, right? We can picture, but mental ceilings are really tricky because they're hard to overcome. And the only way to overcome them is working through them. And the only way to work through them is to acknowledge them. And when they're hard to see and hard to notice, that gets really, really tricky. We can't see mental ceilings. We can experience them, and they can feel very different. And it can take time to realize, oh, hey, this is a mental ceiling. It's a limitation that I have to intentionally push through. As we move through this conversation, something to keep in mind is that we all have blind spots. Based on the family that we grew up in, based on the culture we live in, based on our time in history, whatever it may be, the nature of a blind spot is that you can't see it. And because you can't see your blind spot, being self-aware is really going to be the most important thing to conquering limiting mindsets, because a lot of times those limiting mindsets exist within or around a blind spot. Once you can identify something, you can actually begin to overcome it. And so a lot of what we talk about is going to come back to this idea that we're not going to be able to see clearly all of the things that are keeping us or holding us back. And that's part of that self-awareness, is being able to notice those triggers, notice those opportunities for growth to push through to the next level. Once we identify a mental ceiling or a limiting mindset, then we can do the hard work of unpacking it and using that new knowledge that all of a sudden, okay, we're like, I see this. It was a blind spot, but now I see that it's a limiting mindset that I need to break through, or a mental ceiling that I need to break through. Now I have that knowledge, and I can use that knowledge to level up. An idea that I think is really profound, and I'll use this quite a bit over the next couple of slides, is the idea that our strengths in life can become a weakness. And I know this morning Jamie talked a lot about your personal and professional strengths, and that was such an engaging and a motivating conversation. But something I want to do as sort of a dovetail off of that is to present the idea of strengths becoming a weakness without a healthy boundary. Consider, for example, a fire. Okay, fire uncontained inside of your house or inside of your home is destructive. But that doesn't mean that fire is inherently bad, right? Fire within a fireplace brings warmth, and it brings comfort, and it brings calm. Your strengths can be viewed kind of like that fire. Your strengths can become a weakness without a healthy boundary to protect them. One of my personal strengths is positivity. And it's really coming in handy for me in a lot of different ways, but I have to remember that without a healthy boundary around this particular strength, if I'm not mindful, I can be perceived as lacking in empathy to the people around me. If I constantly say, oh, look at the bright side. Oh, well, at least this isn't happening. Although that positivity is a strength, and I consider it a strength, without being mindful of that strength and the boundaries that I need to set around it, I can be perceived as lacking that empathy, and that strength all of a sudden becomes a weakness in different situations. I also know that one of my strengths is a developer. I love encouraging others. I love motivating others. I want to be seen as encouraging. But without a healthy boundary surrounding that strength of being a developer, I could potentially be seen as really pushy. Like, come on, you can do it. And sometimes that motivation, that constant encouragement, if the timing's not right, that can be seen as really, really pushy. Another strength is empathy. I want to be seen as intuitive. But I could also be seen as overly emotional. So these are just some examples. If you're a relator, you want to be seen as trustworthy and relating to other people in trustworthy manners. That could be seen as exclusionary to other people. So I say this as a way to better tune in, or encourage you to tune into your strengths and understand when those strengths really are your strengths, and when you need to be mindful of that healthy boundary around them so that you can maintain that strength. So once you see this, you can't unsee it. And I'm super excited because ever since I learned about this window of tolerance concept, like, I navigate life, I navigate certain situations with this in mind. And so I'm sorry and you're welcome. It's basically what I'm trying to say. You can't unsee this, and it impacts every area of your life. It helps you begin to identify and overcome those internal barriers, those limiting mindsets. This concept can help you make clear and rational decisions, and it can help you more effectively communicate with colleagues and loved ones. So I'm super excited to get into this. I mentioned at the beginning the idea of being self-aware. Self-awareness is absolutely necessary to healthily get to the next level, advance to the next level, either personally or professionally. And if we don't have that awareness, we'll always act out of old patterns. But a great question is, how do you actually grow in the ability to have awareness of what's happening inside of you? How do you tune into that? And I think this concept of the window of tolerance is really going to help you do that, help you tune in to that idea. This window of tolerance is it's a framework that comes from the complex trauma therapy field. The person whose theory this comes from is Dr. Dan Siegel. He's on the cutting edge of neurobiology. And before we get into the specifics, I want you to think of a time that you felt fully alive. You felt fully yourself. You were in your element, okay? Maybe that was on vacation. Maybe it was an interaction with someone you look up to. Maybe it was a time you got to spend with your kids. Maybe it was that time you finally got a moment to yourself to breathe. Just put that picture in your mind. How did you feel in that moment? Personally, for me, my husband and I went to Kauai, an island of Hawaii, and I was laying in a hammock overlooking the ocean on this cliff, and I can put myself there. I felt at peace, I felt calm, I felt relaxed. And professionally, nailing a presentation gives me that same feeling, where I feel fully alive, where I feel completely myself, where I feel completely in my element. Like I gave that presentation like it was my last that I'll ever have the opportunity to give. And that feeling is incomparable. So I want you to keep that feeling of being fully alive, fully yourself, fully in your element. Keep that in your brain. So here's what this window of tolerance means. Basically, we all have a window. And when you're in your window, you're connected to the wisest, kindest part of yourself, the part of yourself that is able to see from higher perspective, the part of yourself that's able to access thinking and feeling, logic, reason, emotional awareness. So if you think back to that time that you felt fully alive, fully present, fully in the moment, I'm feeling it right now, everybody. So thank you for being on this journey with me. You weren't worried about your to-dos. You weren't worried about your future appointments. You weren't worried about anything else except this moment. You're fully in this moment. You were likely in your window. And when you're in your window, your prefrontal cortex is online. Your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until we're 25 or 26. And if you think about that, it's incredible how many major life decisions we make before the age of 25 and 26 when our prefrontal cortex is fully online. It's insane to me. All of a sudden, your prefrontal cortex comes online. And when you're in your window, situations that you were stuck in before, you can understand in new ways, and you can see new, unique nuances and layers. All of us, the reason why this was built in the complex, the trauma therapy, the complex trauma therapy field, was because all of us have little things we experienced growing up, little things that have impacted us, we'll call them little T traumas. I've heard that used before. They're less obvious than like a clear, straightforward, big T trauma. Maybe there were developmental traumas, like we were made fun of again and again, or someone wasn't paying attention to our emotional needs. Those little things that impact how we see the world when we're young. Those little insecurities. You can think of them as rejection wounds. These get imprinted on our emotional memory. And when we're young, we don't have a higher understanding to be able to gain perspective. We eventually become capable professional adults. And in our adulthood, our prefrontal cortex is online when we're in our window. But those woundings from our younger years can get triggered. And when they get triggered, our higher brain shuts down, that prefrontal cortex shuts down, and we start to go out of our window. And we're seeing this present situation from a younger, wounded part of our neurology. And this is why when you've probably been here, this is why most of the time you're communicating with a rational, functioning adult, right? And then in another interaction, you're like, why does it seem like I'm talking to a teenager? They seem like a different person. It's because they've found themselves outside of their window of tolerance. They're operating from a younger, wounded part of their neurology. And something that was fascinating to me when I learned this was like, all of this made so much sense. Like I have goosebumps thinking about the first time that I learned about this, because I've been there where I know that I'm reacting and responding to a situation in a way that's not me. That's not what I would, want to do. But now that I have an understanding of what's happening chemically in my brain, and I have something to visualize what's happening as a concept, It makes so much sense. And when we're in our window, we can access things like creative problem solving. We can access optimal productivity, creativity. And it's really, really important to recognize when we leave our window. If you go out of the top of your window, you likely experience anxiety symptoms, things like feeling super overwhelmed, racing thoughts, catastrophic thinking. You go from 0 to 100 in terms of your thinking patterns in no time flat. When you go into a state of hyper arousal, it activates a fight or flight response. Now, when we're in physical danger, we want our higher brain to shut down. It's not the time to think about complexities if we're in physical danger. Like if someone sneaks up on me and jumps me from behind to attack me or steal my purse, I don't want to sit and think, oh gosh, what did this person go through today that is making them do this, right? I want to fight or flight, like punch them in the face or run, like something. So I don't want that higher brain to be running the show in that moment. But here's the thing. Most of us aren't in a physically threatening situation, but we still find ourselves in a state of hyper arousal. We're seeing the present situation from a younger lens, okay? Like, I just have to respond to this email, or I just have to do this one thing. One thing to be in your window and leveraging the high end of it, like being present, adaptable, open, calm, grounded, but being able to kind of ride that line of hyper arousal to maybe produce more productivity. That's one thing. But understanding when you top out outside of your window is another. Now, conversely, if you drop out the bottom, this is when you feel numb, you feel shut down, you feel cut off from your emotions, nothing's coming in, nothing's going out. You are on lockdown. That's the freeze response. You've probably heard fight, flight, or freeze. Well, if you're in a hypoarousal state, you're on lockdown. You're frozen. Some people have tendencies one direction or the other, where just, stressful things happen. They automatically either go up or go down out of their window. And one way, at work with tasks and priorities, you could be super hypo-aroused, where, you're numb, you're frozen, you don't know how to move forward. And then all of a sudden you get home and it's a different kind of stress and you're hyper-aroused and you're stressed out, you're going a mile a minute, or vice versa. Some of us are in, the top end and the low end of our window at work versus home. And obviously that goal is to understand when those triggers happen that pull us outside of this window. Navigating conflict is a lot easier to do when you are in your window. If one or both of you are out of your window, I promise you that conversation will end poorly, okay? Your starting point will determine your end point. So if someone processes something in a hypo or a hyper aroused state, it re-imprints the trauma in the brain and it deepens the unhelpful neurological pathways. When we get into the same unhealthy negative loop cycles, it gets us more locked into a stuck pattern. But the more we have awareness of when we're in our window and the more we can leverage that and the more we can understand that about ourselves, the better off we will be. Now, I am not encouraging any of you when you're in a conflict with someone at work or someone at home next to be like, oh, you're outside of your window. Let's chat when we're inside your window. Like, these concepts are only helpful to people who know them, who understand them, who have seen them. But the beauty of this whole conference is you can share these presentations with your colleagues. And I think something Melanie and I were talking about before this session started, these are helpful just in general life, regardless of what industry someone finds themselves in. If you can recognize that you're not in your window, the number one goal for you is to get back in it. Don't make decisions or come to conclusions outside of your window because, like I said, those will likely end poorly. And that comes back to that self-awareness idea where if we don't understand what our window is or what our window feels like, then how are we to know when we're outside of it? So I encourage you to be aware of how you're feeling in certain situations. there are certain ditch tendencies that exist in various things. So communication, work ethic, boundaries, modesty, care, what your path looks like, what your finances are. Kind of see it as like one side of is a mountain and one side is a valley. And wherever you have valleys, your ultimate goal is to raise those up, and wherever you have mountains, your ultimate goal is to lower them down. I'll give the example of modesty. One extreme ditch tendency is being prideful or arrogant and thinking too highly of yourself. But the other side is for you to think, who are you to think that everyone else is special but you? True humility is recognizing what is true about yourself. You're not less than, you're not better than, but holding the both and. Other people matter and you matter. Throughout this presentation, I'll give healthy examples of my own perspective of healthy parenting, or what I'm trying to achieve through parenting, healthy self-leadership. And if that's a new term for you, I encourage you to explore that idea of being able to lead yourself before you're able to lead others. It's this combination of high warmth and high expectation in both settings, in the healthy parenting and healthy self-leadership. And I am by no means an expert in either one of those things, but I can speak from experience and use the language that I've obtained to talk through some of this information. It's helpful to recognize these things when you're interacting with someone and that interaction is just getting stuck somewhere, because maybe you both have these ditch tendencies when it comes to communication where you're super aggressive, they're super passive, and so you're not going to come to the best conclusion because one of you is going to take over and the other one's not going to give any input. So it's important to understand that these ditch tendencies do exist. A couple of reflection questions will be sprinkled throughout this presentation. So I'm really excited to share these with you. I want to start off right away with this reflection question. What are mindsets that you've gained mastery over that used to be an issue for you that are no longer limiting? We'll get there, but what limiting mindsets have you struggled with in the past that you've since left behind or made progress on? And this is a hard question because for some of us, limiting mindsets is a brand new concept. So we don't even have the language to describe what that could be. But what's been something holding you back, even if it's a situation? Maybe it's a person who every time you communicate, one or both of you are outside of your window of tolerance, and that's the issue. But what limiting mindsets have you struggled with in the past that you've since left behind or you feel like you've overcome? And then secondly, what mindsets are you currently struggling with? And as we work through these questions, let's start by being intentionally kind and intentionally curious about ourselves, because I think it's really easy to slip into that way of thinking that says, who am I to think I'm anything special or that I have anything to contribute? It's really easy to slip into that pattern of thinking because we don't often, like Jamie said this morning, we don't often tell ourselves that we're proud of what we're doing or that we're capable. So let's begin to notice and put language to these things, because until we see them, we're going to react from them instead of work through them. So what I want to do now is talk about some really common limiting mindsets that I've certainly witnessed through the mentoring that I've done in the sterile processing industry, that I've certainly worked through myself. These have been limiting mindsets for me in various ways. But hopefully this will, add some language to some feelings that you've felt in the past in various situations. And one of those is a scarcity mentality. This is really when we're always looking at lack, that there's not enough resources to go around. One of the obvious origins of this in American history is the Great Depression, when there was very literally scarcity. And if there's scarcity, there's a need to hoard or hold on to what we do have. Scarcity mentality is that I have to hold on to and cling to the things that I have because other resources might not be available, as opposed to having this sort of fresh inflow and fresh outflow where I freely give and I freely receive. Now, scarcity mentality especially plays out when we're comparing ourselves to others. when you apply this to how we view others and view ourselves, it creates this hierarchical thinking. If this person that I see is special, then I must be less than them, or I have to somehow get above them, versus there's enough specialness to go around, right? It's like if you have kids. Out of my 3 kids, if I were to be asked which one is the most special, well, they're all special in their unique ways, right? I love each of them in very different ways and very similar ways, but I have enough love in my heart to love them all. And so that concept of thinking like you see someone who's special, who's doing it right in your mind, that doesn't make you less than. Okay, there's enough of that to go around. Scarcity mentality is an opportunity to recognize that there's enough love and abundance to realize that someone else being special doesn't detract from your own unique specialness. It's about shifting mentality from I have to take what I can get, and who knows if there's going to be opportunity coming to me, to beginning to recognize that there's an abundance of possibility and opportunity. One application that I see play out in my own life, and certainly in the lives of the professionals around me, is this idea of time being scarce. Okay, this is such a funny thing to talk about. There's a mindset, a strong mindset in the business world that time is money, that I have to hustle, I can't waste time, which on some levels is true, but there's an element of scarcity mentality related to this, where time is slipping away, so I have to cling to what's here, and if I don't manage it perfectly, then I'm going to mess everything up. So there's one way of thinking about time as slipping away, which is in some ways true, time passes, but it's not the whole picture. If you look at time with an abundance mentality instead of a scarcity mentality, then you see it as more of a renewable resource. Like every day I get to wake up with more time. I get the opportunity to take advantage, to seek out new opportunities. Every day I get to receive new time and more time. One example of looking at things from a different vantage point is looking at time through that abundance mentality. This scarcity mentality is just the first step in putting language to this type of limiting mindset, and it can apply to promotions. Like if this other person gets a promotion, there will never be another promotion for me to get, so I have to put myself above them. That's another way to look at scarcity mentality from a professional lens as well. Here's another example of one that I've experienced really strongly in the past, and I have some idea as to where it originated from for me personally that I won't necessarily get into, but very strong, and that's right or wrong thinking. This thinking is that there's only one right way to do something, and I have to figure out what that right way is, and if I get it wrong, I'm going to mess everything up. This is a really harmful way of thinking. It really gets you stuck. And so beginning to recognize right or wrong thinking, that there's not actually only one right thing to do. Oftentimes there are multiple ways. It's okay to make mistakes, and there are multiple ways to get to the same outcome, especially in a professional development scenario. So these are just a few examples that I know personally that I used to have. They might still be tendencies that I catch myself in every once in a while, but I oftentimes remind myself, like, okay, there might be a third option. Like there's not a right way or a wrong way to do this thing. There's another way that I can explore. And then same with scarcity mentality. Like tomorrow I'll wake up with more time, and what a gift that is. So looking at time with an abundance lens instead of a scarcity lens just shifts that perspective and allows you to stay positive. The next mindset that I want to cover, this one's a doozy. Let me tell you, perfectionism. I think of perfectionism as a counterfeit to excellence. And I say that because when you're a person of excellence, it means you want to do things well. You have a vision of what can be, and you want things to be done in the best way possible. That's a strength. That's amazing. I love that for you. But like we talked about before, our strengths without a healthy boundary around them can in fact become weaknesses. It's like a fire loose in a home is destructive, but a fire contained in a fireplace provides comfort and warmth. So a spirit of excellence outside of the fireplace can turn into perfectionism. And with perfectionism, you start to experience something called analysis paralysis. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that term before, but analysis paralysis is that when you want to wait till you can do something perfectly. And until you can do it perfectly, you are now frozen and can't do anything at all. Okay? So until you can get it absolutely perfect, you don't do anything. And that goes back to being counterfeit to excellence, because the beauty of trying something is the opportunity to iterate, the opportunity to improve on the first iteration. This is a massive limiting mindset to be aware of, and one that can sincerely hold you back. I like to give the example of the tech industry, where the smallest amount that counts as something and works is what they put out. It's called minimum viable product. So think of an app that you recently downloaded. Chances are when that app came to the market, it was the minimum viable product. It was something that worked. And these tech companies get it out in the world and they get user feedback. And that user feedback is just data. It's not personal. If it's not perfect, it's data. It's necessary data to keep iterating on the process. This makes me think of a new app for the sterile processing industry called SID, the Surgical Instrument Database. It's by a company called Layerjot. If you haven't heard of it, I think layerjot.com is the website. But it's an app that you take a picture of an instrument and it tells you what it is with your cell phone. It's so cool. I know the industry has been wanting and asking for something like that for so long, and it's here. But my guess is now that it's recently launched, they just launched it during the Beyond Clean SPX conference in April. Now that it's launched, they're likely collecting that data from users, that user feedback, so that they can continue to improve and continue to iterate. And that's a beautiful thing. That's what we can do with anything that we try, anything that we put out into the world. It's about bringing things to the world and not worrying about if they're perfect, and learning through that process, trusting the developmental process. As humans, nobody gives birth to a full-grown adult, okay? Right? Ow, that's crazy. Nobody gives birth to a full-grown adult. What you do, you give birth to a baby and you steward its development over time. And that's such a perfect analogy for the things that are new to us that we put out into the world. It's not going to be this fully developed thing. It's going to develop over time. It's a developmental process. Okay, so this leads into another potentially harmful limiting mindset. I did a LinkedIn post about this conference yesterday. And if you don't follow me on LinkedIn, please connect with me. I would love that so much. But I referenced a book that I just started reading called Think Again. It's by an author named Adam Grant. And in it, in the first 30 pages, he drops some serious golden nuggets, like mic drops left and right. But he put together this concept, or he presented this concept called armchair quarterback syndrome. How many of you have ever sat and watched a sporting event from the comfort of your home, in your living room, from your recliner, popcorn in hand, or in my case, Doritos, probably a beer, and you were saying, "Oh, come on, coach, I would have done a better call than that," or "Come on, I can see better than you can, and I'm 1,000 miles away looking through a tiny box." Like you're yelling at the screen as though you know more than the people who are running the show at the actual game. In this book, Adam Grant says, in theory, confidence and competence go hand in hand. In practice, they often diverge. And he goes on to talk about individuals who experience this armchair quarterback syndrome, where they think they know more than the people running the show and calling the shots, without acknowledging that the actual competence to do so in themselves is lacking. I think this is a fascinating concept, because it's this idea that I know best. But it's an opportunity to recognize that competence and confidence are not the same thing, okay? And oftentimes they play out in a divergent pattern, which is fascinating. So I'm curious if you notice these things around you in your professional or personal settings. Conversely, this perfectly ties into individuals with imposter syndrome, where their competence far exceeds their level of confidence, and therefore they don't believe that they deserve success. Okay? Imposter syndrome is another really, really damaging limiting mindset because it can hold us back, I would argue, more easily than any of these other limiting mindsets that we've talked about. You know, this is so funny to me. Imposter syndrome is something that I've dealt with a lot. When I gave my first presentation at a conference, it was for the California Central Service Association. It's in Northern California. I was scared out of my mind because in my head, I was about to speak to professionals who do sterile processing. Like, sterile processing is what they do. It's what they know. And I was supposed to somehow educate them. Like, what? Who am I to think that I can educate them? But that presentation was about communicating. And I have a degree in communications. And so throughout that presentation, the opportunity for me to share what I know and use that in situations that they know and apply it to situations that they know ended up being really powerful and really impactful. Do I still get freakishly nervous before presenting? Yes. I was like, sweating like crazy, downing drinks of water before this presentation. I get super nervous before everything. And I can't see a single one of you. I can see my own self. I can see my slide. I can't see anyone else who's tuned in, but I know you're there. And that's nerve-wracking to me, but it's also really, really exciting for me because it's an opportunity that I have to resonate with you and to connect with you. I want to come back to the idea of being kind and patient and curious about ourselves. And I want to give you another, I think, really just like spot on analogy. Have you ever stepped on an acorn? If you have, barefoot, let me clarify. Have you ever stepped on an acorn barefoot? Well, if you have, you'll likely notice that an acorn is about yay big. It's not awesome to step on. And that acorn will eventually grow into an oak tree. But that acorn isn't an imposter oak tree, okay? It's just at a different developmental stage, a different stage of the developmental process. That acorn is on a journey to become an oak tree, but it's not there yet, okay? And I want you to apply that analogy when you're trying something new, when you're experiencing something you've never navigated before. And understand that you as well are in a developmental process of your own. Maybe you're at the acorn stage, like just starting out. If you're brand new to sterile processing, welcome. You're at that acorn stage. Maybe you have a little sprout growing up. We'll see. But eventually you'll be that oak tree. But you're at a different developmental phase than the people around you. And that's an important thing to consider. We're really going to deep dive into removing some of these emotional barriers, okay? And here's the cool thing. Whatever mental ceiling you identify is going to be your next place of victory. You love saying that out loud. Let me say that again. Whatever mental ceiling you identify is going to be your next place of victory because you're aware of it, okay? And that is the first step in working through it and busting through that ceiling is just being aware of it. It means whatever challenges that you face, it gets to be a stepping stone for you rather than a stumbling block now because you acknowledge it. You have that self-awareness. And this is what makes me really excited about finally becoming aware of and identifying a blind spot or something that I've been stumbling over year after year or month after month and just haven't gotten to the bottom of it. So when I actually see it for what it is, that's going to be my next area of breakthrough. And I'm super excited that that same idea applies to you because breaking through that ceiling is going to advance you to that next cool thing. It's going to allow you to reach that next level. I love that. let's talk about overcoming mindsets, because up until this point, we've spent a ton of time understanding and putting language to different limiting mindsets that exist. And so let's deep dive into how we can actually overcome them. And I want to start off by saying, whenever you remove a negative, it is super critical to replace it with something positive. Because here's why. When I say this word out loud, Mayo scissors. Now, do not picture a Mayo scissors. Stop it. Do not picture a Mayo. Stop it. You're probably picturing a Mayo scissors right now, right? It's kind of like with kids. Oftentimes we tell them what not to do after they misbehave, but then that's all they know. They don't know what to do instead. So they know what not to do, but they have no idea what to do instead. So what we want to make sure is that when we remove these limiting mindsets, we have a clear vision on what and how to think instead. Okay? So removing that negative is step one. Replacing it with something positive is step two. Okay? Make sure that space isn't void. Replace it with something that's going to serve you. It's really important for you to be able to permeate the way you see yourself in the world, and that's by having a developmental perspective. We've talked about this a bit, but here's the thing. You're in a developmental process. I'm in a developmental process. And there are two types of people in successful businesses and successful departments, okay? There's someone who's a visionary, who sees ahead to what something can be in its mature state. But then there are the pioneers that put in the work to actually get there. Both of those roles are critical. You can't be ahead of where you're at right now, and each stage is absolutely necessary. The key comes back to being self-aware and understanding which stage of the developmental process you're actually in. Again, you give birth to an infant, not a full-grown adult. That acorn is not an imposter oak tree. It's just at a different developmental stage. You start where you start, and then you nurture it. You nurture yourself. You nurture your growth along the way. Wherever you are in your developmental process, parent yourself, lead yourself with kindness and with patience. Even having the awareness that you're in this developmental process helps activate the part of your brain that takes the big picture view. And that's why that self-awareness is so key, because all of a sudden you're able to have perspective. It's just like a baby learning to walk. I have a lot of baby analogies because my toddlers it's my reality. So when a baby learns to walk, when they first learned how to walk and they fell down, I didn't say, come on, dumb baby, you're supposed to know how to do this. Right? How terrible. No, I encouraged them. I nurtured the process. I encouraged them to get back up. A parent recognizes that falling down is built into the process of learning how to walk. And at some point along the way, this idea got lost, this idea of encouraging new skills of the people around us. Someone learning something new, if they're not perfect at it yet, that's awesome. At least they're trying. At least they're doing it. And I think there's value in witnessing and acknowledging that everybody's in a different developmental stage. Another piece of this is recognizing what stage you're in, but also understanding when it's time to move to the next one. Recognizing when something right for one stage may not be right for the next. When was it right to check and double check the work of those around you? And when does this action transition from being helpful to hindering their growth? All of this is part of recognizing that things are not static, that they're dynamic. They're always moving, and hopefully always moving forward. So having this perspective will help you move out of perfectionist, out of imposter syndrome, out of scarcity mentality. And another thing to recognize is that sometimes we have seasons where we're really faced with our own limitations. And once we start to hit a mental ceiling in our current season, it often feels freaking personal and painful. And it can feel like it will last forever. But again, that perspective piece, that awareness piece, that it's actually only a stage, and it's a necessary stage in our journey. Here in Minnesota, after winter always comes the spring. Sometimes it's middle of May, but it comes. And if you think about it, we've talked about advancing to the next level, if you're growing in your season, you're taking up so much space and you hit that ceiling of where your limitations are, it's important to recognize that this is a season and seasons move through. There will be a new place of opportunity, a new place of possibility to build momentum and help you feel that it's not permanent, it's temporary. Another analogy, I love my analogies today. So another analogy is to think of those stuck moments, those moments of that feel like you just keep being pulled back for one reason or another. You see the big picture, you see where you want to be, where you want to go, but you, for some reason, just keep being pulled back. So it's kind of like a catapult. Okay, you can think of it like a catapult where you have to have times of being pulled back and it feels like you're going backwards in order to be propelled further forward. And that's a powerful perspective to maintain. Another way to think of it is ebb and flow. Sometimes it feels like you're going backwards, which is necessary to get that height, that perspective, to get filled in. And from that place, you move forward with momentum and with vigor. And that's so powerful. With this is also recognizing that there are times of inflow and times of outflow, meaning for us to be healthy, we need some things to pour into us. We need to be able to get that inflow where new things are pouring into us, new experiences are being experienced, new opportunities are coming up. And because we're being fed by those, our outflow is more healthy and more effective. All of these things are beginning to give you language to help you think about and replace those limiting mindsets and have a different framework to operate within. Again, everything is dynamic, everything is moving. Those seasonal shifts will happen, but recognizing them, especially on the timeline of your developmental process, can really impact your perspective. So let's go through this question. What area of your life help you to see through a developmental process? Like, is there an area of your life where you think, gosh, I should be here by now. I should be doing this by now. What area of your life is that? And would it help you to see that area of your life through a developmental process? How might your life be different if you no longer struggled with this limiting mindset? So one of the beautiful things that is super helpful is being able to envision what that difference is. Envision what's holding you back so you know, so you're aware, so you can be intentional about working through those ceilings. And how would your work change if you saw it through a developmental process? Would it change? Are you already seeing it through a developmental process? If so, good for you. I am seeing my work through a developmental process. Justin Poulin, one of my colleagues, recently posted on LinkedIn a video about how he knows he doesn't know everything about this industry, but he surrounds himself with people who know different things than he does so that he can learn. And I got goosebumps listening to that, because how powerful is that to recognize, to not have that armchair expert syndrome, but to understand that there's an opportunity for everyone to bring their strengths to the table and for everyone to learn from each other. We're going to cover the most foundational framework that's been helpful for me. And I want to start with this definition. It's dualistic thinking. It's viewing the world through a binary lens where there are two and only two polar opposite, mutually exclusive choices or realities. It's this either or, this or that, right or wrong, all or nothing, good or bad thinking. Something that can happen with dualistic thinking, understanding or believing that it's either this or that, it's right or wrong, it's good or bad, it's all or nothing, it's either or. It can lead to things like false dilemmas, when you think you only have two options and are stuck having to choose between those two options instead of seeing a possible third option. It can lead to us versus them, and we see this play out all around us. When we're strong in dualistic thinking, we're on this side, they're on that side. Everything is this or that, right or wrong. And the question and the challenge is, how do we begin to see the both and? One of the most impactful things to do is replace either or thinking with both and thinking. That's non-dualistic thinking. This is a more mature contemplation of perceived events that allow us to see subtleties, complexities, nuance, mystery, exceptions, ambiguity. I'm not saying that dualistic thinking is bad or even that it's right or wrong, because dualistic and non, or right or wrong between dualistic and non, it's that we don't want to be limited to having only dualistic thinking. Sometimes there's a time and a place where we need to simplify things. And at the same time, it's helpful to recognize that a lot of times there's more going on than this or that. So non-dualistic thinking sees both and. It makes room for the bigger picture. We're not stuck in our silos. You're able to see other people's perspectives alongside your own. It holds space for multiple perspectives and views, not just mine and theirs or ours and theirs, but a variety of perspectives and views. It allows you to focus on the relationship between things rather than putting them into categories. And if I couldn't make time for a fully intensive 90-minute workout, for example, then I wouldn't do it at all. Okay, this or that. If I don't get my giant workout in, super intense for 90 minutes, I'm not going to do it at all. But I need to recognize that some is better than none, right? If I go for a walk, if I do a couple squats, maybe I should do some right after this presentation in this little phone booth that I'm in. But it's the concept of knowing that there's more. It's that nuance, the complexity, the subtlety. There are opportunities when I call them opportunities as though that's a good thing. When we're outside of our window of tolerance, it can lead to chronic stress over time. And chronic stress over time rewires our brain and our body. So it can be traumatic to be burnt out. Our brain chemistry is changing. Chemicals being released in our brain when we are in fight, flight, or freeze have changed how we operate when we're under chronic stress over time. When we're in chronic stress, the prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, our ability to see those complexities and those nuances goes offline. And you lose the ability to be self-aware. Our body can sense this in others. Can you believe that? Have you ever been around someone who's really, really stressed out? And all of a sudden your nervous system picks up on those cues. We have physiological reactions to things all the time. So when we're around someone who's stressed out, all of a sudden our heart rate goes up. All of a sudden we start becoming anxious. We need to learn ways to calm our bodies down when we're in a stressed state, and also over time. Now, these that you see on the screen came from some Stanford neuroscientists. And the first one is the idea of a physiological sigh. If you've ever been around a small kid or a puppy, and even ourselves, but we don't notice it because we're likely just about to fall asleep. But when puppies and when kids are just about like on that teetering on the edge of falling asleep, they do a physiological sigh. It's 2 inhales through the nose and a big exhale, or a big in. 2 inhales through the nose and a big exhale. So, you ever seen your puppy or your dog do that? That's a physiological sigh. If you do this one 1 to 3 times, your body's physiological response to stress will decrease and it can calm yourself down. The next one is 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in through your nose for 4, you hold it for the count of 7, you exhale it for 8. This is elongated breath. When you're in a high state of arousal, 4-7-8 breathing can trick your nervous system. Longer exhales calm your system. Longer inhales amp you up. The final one is boxed breathing. It's in through your nose for 3, hold for the count of 3, exhale for 3, hold for 3. This is proven by science, is used by Navy SEALs in training to combat stress. You can be in a meeting, you can be having a conversation with someone who's super stressful to you. You don't have to go sit and get in a meditative state to do this. You don't need your essential oils or your salt lamp. We're constantly in situations, especially at work, when we can get stressed out. So many things can be triggering on some level, but these options can all be done without even letting anyone around you know that they're happening. And they can help keep you in a calm state. These help in real time, short-term stress response help, okay? The next thing that I'll mention is some longer-term opportunities. The stuff we do over time consistently to keep our bodies in a calm state can help rewire our brain and help with neuroplasticity. It helps our brain rewire the new ways of thinking and doing in a non-stressed state. If you've never heard of Yoga Nidra, do a quick Google search or quick YouTube search. You can do it for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but it's scientifically proven to get you into a calm state. It's essentially non-sleep deep rest. So if you have a couple extra minutes, definitely check out Yoga Nidra for mindfulness-based stress reduction. Journaling. I am terrible at journaling. I don't view myself as a writer. I don't find journaling calm, but I do understand that dumping all of the negative out of my body in a way such as journaling can help me create space to fill it with positive. So when you have a lot on your mind and it's not getting out, by getting it out in raw, real, unapologetic ways, it shifts our physiological state. It creates room for new ideas. It gets the energy out so your brain has new space. It's that release. And then exercise. Exercise is still the best thing we can do to keep our serotonin and dopamine levels where they need to be. It's the best de-stressor you can do. You don't need a gym. Walking or moderate exercise 30 minutes a day will do the trick. When you're able to start moving your body, it calms our nervous system down. And when we calm our nervous system down, that calms our brain down. And when we calm our brain down, that's when we're able to think clearly. That's when we're able to self-reflect. And that's when we're actually able to make a mind shift. But until we get our bodies into that calm state, it's like Groundhog's Day. We get stuck in that state of being outside of our window. So exercise can be super, super impactful. The final question I'm going to ask you is, where might you benefit from replacing either or thinking with both and thinking? And this can be in your professional life, it can be in your personal life. But I want you to make note of where you might benefit. Maybe there's a place that you've been stuck. And maybe the shift from either or thinking to both and is what's going to catapult you to that next level. Storms are inevitable in our life, professionally, personally. But the secret is learning how to leverage them. How do you have a mindset that will pull you through the biggest challenges and pain points along the way? We've talked about how to overcome limiting mindsets, but how do you know that you have an overcomer mindset? Meaning I actually have confidence that no matter what comes my way, I will find a way to overcome this situation and move forward. No matter what you face, trust on some level that it'll work out for your good and propel you forward. There's an element of trust in taking a risk, in stepping into the unknown and knowing that in some way it's going to work out in the end. And a lot of that has to do, being in that mindset, a lot of that has to do with understanding where your limiting mindsets exist and how to overcome them. I want to leave you with this because I believe it, that you are way more capable than you know. You're so much more adaptable than you realize. And I know Jamie hit on these points so beautifully this morning when she asked you to put those capable comments together, those capable statements. I am capable. Even saying that to yourself is powerful. It's trusting your ability to grow and to adapt. Every challenge you face can be a stumbling block or a stepping stone. And sometimes there are seasons in life where we're pulled backward, but setting us up to propel us forward is what's happening. And those moments can be one of these two things, and that decision is yours. Find the places, this is my encouragement to you, find the places that you can be poured into, that you can find refreshment, so that you don't get burnt out. Use those tools, those breathing tools, when you're in stressful situations. It's all about your vantage point, and any given end state can be reached by so many potential means. Multiple roads can lead to a similar outcome, but trust that there's the way for you. My wish for you all is the acknowledgement that you are way more capable than you know, and that self-awareness and both and thinking will help your next ceiling become your new floor. It's only up from here, my friends. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thank you for joining us for this presentation, for this conference. Thank you, Proper, for understanding that professional development is important in every industry, especially sterile processing. And with that, Melanie, I'll turn it over to you.
Lindsay, it was wonderful. You stepped on my toes for sure with some things that I need to reflect on and need to improve on, but it was an eye opener and maybe even a mind opener to some different things to address. And I know for me, I'll be going back through it and looking at your slides again just to kind of read up on it some more, which I'm thankful that this will be available on demand. If anybody else wants to catch it later, you will certainly be able to see it. But Lindsay, that was great. Thank you. We are out of time. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Lindsay. She will respond to you. Her contact information is on the screen or on her speaker bio as well. If you're curious about CEs, you will be able to get those at the end of the sixth session. You will be redirected to the survey, and from there you'll get your CE certificate. We're going to have about a 10-minute break before we get to our next speaker. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us today. Lindsay, thank you for this wonderful presentation. We will see you all back in about 10 minutes. Thank you, guys.
It's been a pleasure.